Now, I know it's been a little while since the last video, but I wanted to make sure I had everything in line for this. And I think you guys are gonna like what's coming. Let's build a race car. If you guys have been watching the last couple of videos, you'll know that the motor on the STI decided it was time to head out. Now, despite this car only having 30,000 miles on it when I bought it, we ran into the typical Subaru cylinder 4 ring lane failure. Unfortunately, this involves building a whole new motor if you want to do it right. So that brings us to today. We're right here. We've got everything we need to turn this car into the car that I've always wanted it to be. We've got everything from fueling mods to blow-off valves, brand new head studs, new fuel pump, new clutch, injectors, all the reliability mods for the Subaru, and of course, actually fixing the problem we had with this brand new V3 short block from out front. When I was thinking about how I was gonna go about rebuilding this car, I thought about it in two ways. I could spend as little as possible, just get the car back up and running and basically return it to what it was before, or I could take the opportunity to build the car I've always wanted to build. And that's exactly what I did. But as I'm sure a lot of you Subaru guys know, with these cars, you gotta pay to play. So as of right now, we are about $20,000 deep in parts for this car already, and I'm sure there's gonna be more that we need, but I think at the end it's gonna be worth it. Now, we're not gonna be jumping into building the long block in today's video, but I wanted to go through and kind of show you guys everything that I have for this car because it's pretty cool. So like I said, starting off with the short block, this is out front V3 built short block with the closed deck. Now, I'll be straight up front with you guys. My power goals for this car is around that 500 mark on ethanol. So that's why I kind of went with a sturdier block. We're still gonna be running stock cams and stock valves, although I did upgrade to GSC valve springs and retainers. So this motor is definitely gonna be able to handle everything we throw at it. Instead of just showing you guys all these parts and boxes, I'm gonna get them out on the table for you. Okay, so right here is pretty much everything for our fuel system. Starting off from the back of the car, we have the radium hanger. This is a super sweet piece. It's just a better housing over the stock housing. It's made of all CNC aluminum, and it has the ability to hold 2 pumps, which we're only gonna be running 1 pump in this build, but it's still nice to have that. It also allows us to hardwire the fuel pump, which is what we are going to be doing. That way we can have a constant power source from the battery. Speaking of fuel pumps, this is our fuel pump. This is a Deechworks 420 liter per hour. This will be more than enough for ethanol. We are still gonna be running the stock hard lines under body, but we are going to be running the radium fuel filter. I'm gonna have to make a kind of a custom setup for this. It mounts right next to the steering rack almost in the car, but this will be nice. It's definitely important to have a fuel filter just to keep your fuel system clean. Then for our lines in bay, I bought the radium kit, but this is the rubber line that they give you. And I kind of want to switch it out for some custom nylon hose, which I'll probably do. I don't need it, but I like the way it looks better in this engine bay. And I want this to be kind of everything I want. Next up, we have the radium fuel rails. We're basically radium everything on this build. Radium fuel rails, these are nice. We're gonna be running this setup in series just because I don't know that I need to run it in parallel for the 500 horsepower mark. And when I do the parallel, the experience I had with the white STI, if you guys remember that, is that without the dampers, you have the regulator is super loud. So it's a little bit more simpler with the series system. If I want to upgrade to a rotated kit in the future, then I'll probably move to a parallel system. But for right now, running it in series is going to be just fine. For injectors, we are running the AUS 1450 cc injectors. This will be more than enough for ethanol. And other than that, we just have a series of lines and fittings over here. Everything that Radium creates is awesome. I'm sure if you guys have been in the motorsport world, you know who Radium is. So I don't know that I need to say more. Now for some reliability, we have the Killer Bee oil pan pickup and baffle. If you guys know, the stock oil pan on these cars is pretty weak sauce and oil does slosh around and pulls away from the pickup. So the whole point of this pan and the baffle and pickup is to A, add another quart of oil to the system, and B, to keep the oil near the pickup. So it has a series of baffles. There's also a baffle tray over here in this box that I'm not gonna take out yet, but it basically keeps all the oil down in the bottom and near the pickup so you never starve out of oil. The other oiling component we have is an 11 millimeter shimmed oil pump. I just went ahead and got a new oil pump just to make sure that the oil system on this car is robust and never gonna fail. I'll probably also do an oil pressure sensor a little bit later on. I just haven't bought it yet, yet, but it's definitely something on the list. But one thing that's cool is you have multiple ports on the bottom of this. So you have your drain, and then you also have another 1/2-inch NPT for a sensor if you wanted to. I'm pretty sure that's more for oil temp, which I don't think I'm gonna be adding quite yet unless I plan to track the car, which I'm not looking to do so right now, but if I want to in the future, I could. The other thing we have, like I mentioned, is the fluid damper. This is just a nice reliability mod and it helps with the longevity of the engine. Now on to probably everybody's favorite part of this build, the turbo. You know we had to upgrade the turbo to hit that 500 horsepower goal. So here it is. I've decided to go with the Blausch 3.0 G2R turbo. This is a ball bearing turbo. And to pair with that, we are also going to be running the Tile external wastegate. So we have the welded internal wastegate option right here. This is a pretty wicked bad turbo. From everything that I've heard about this turbo is that it spools very similarly to stock, so which is kind of nice. I don't want a super big laggy turbo, so I think this spools around the 45 to 47 RPM range, which is super nice. So it's gonna spool early and it's gonna spool quick and it's gonna be a lot of fun. And not to mention that external wastegate flutter, which compared with this other mod, our Killer B equal length headers is gonna sound pretty incredible. Now I know I'm getting rid of the Subi Rumble, but in my mind, the equal length with the external wastegate sounds just as good. It's different, but it sounds just as good. These are probably some of the best headers you can get for the STI on the market. It's a 4-into-1, and then it comes up to our up pipe, up to our turbo. This is still a stock location turbo. I didn't want to go rotated on this setup quite yet. Going rotated for the 500 horsepower mark is not necessarily needed in my mind. You definitely can get there, obviously on a rotated kit, but I kind of wanted to keep it stock location for now. But everything Killer B makes is best of the best when it comes to Subarus. That's kind of what they specialize in. These are the same headers that I ran on the white STI, if you guys remember that, and they sound pretty good. Now we got all this power, but we gotta have a way to put down the power. So right here, we have an ACT Mod Twin clutch. This is more than enough clutch for the power levels that we're gonna be handling, but I wanna be able to launch this car. I wanna be able to flat foot shift this car, and this clutch is gonna be the one to do it. I like to build my cars a little bit overkill, just so I have the peace of mind that everything's gonna work. I don't have this looming, part of the car is gonna fail, so I went all out, but buy once, cry once, am I right? I've actually driven this clutch before in a rotated kit STI, and it actually feels pretty good. It's not too heavy. It's definitely dailyable clutch. It's gonna take some getting used to. It's definitely different than the stock clutch, but overall, it's a super nice clutch, and I'm definitely excited to run it in this car. Now, for the last couple of things regarding the turbo and all the boosts that we're gonna be making, we have a Perrin 3-inch inlet. I was gonna go with the hard inlet, but it's such a pain to install, so I went ahead with the Perrin. It's a lot more forgiving, but this is the 3-inch inlet version to fit the big 3-inch turbo. We also have for our blow-off valve, we're gonna be switching to speed density, so I went ahead and I picked up the HKS super sequential valve. I know there's a lot of different blow-off valves out there, but I kind of wanted to have a little bit of that JDM sound and vibe to this car, and so I think that this will help with that. If you've heard this blow-off valve, it sounds super good, and if you haven't heard it, I recommend going and looking up some videos of the way it sounds. It's very distinguished, it's very recognizable, and it's gonna sound sick on this car. A couple other mods, we have two. We have the Cobb boost control solenoid. This is a must. We gotta have this for tuning. And then we also have for flex fuel, which is I forgot to mention when we covered our fuel system, we're gonna be running the Innovate flex fuel sensor and gauge. I'm gonna have to do some custom wiring for this, but I think it will be manageable. I was recommended this by my tuner, and for what I've seen, all the flex fuel sensors are GM sensors. So at the end of the day, the flex fuel sensor is a flex fuel sensor, but hopefully this setup will work for what we're trying to do. But I definitely wanted to make sure that I went flex fuel on this car, worth all the effort to do it, and it's what will help us get to that 500 horsepower mark. Now, the last pretty big mod that we have for this car is going to be this ETS intercooler. This is the 3-inch core, which will be more than enough. And then we also went with the powder coat black finish. I'm going to have to custom fab the cold side of this intercooler setup because if you guys remember, I have the Cobb Redline intake. It's a super sweet, solid carbon fiber piece intake. and I definitely want to continue to use that. It's like one of my favorite parts about the engine bay of this car, but in order to do that, we're gonna have to custom fab this piping and weld it back together so that we can fit around that Cobb intake, but it's gonna be super sweet. I went with the black to go ahead and match. I think it matches better with the engine bay. It's a little bit cleaner, and also our AOS is powder coated black, so it'll kind of contrast with the powder coated red intake manifold. We're still gonna be running the stock intake manifold on this car, but I think the black with the red is gonna be pretty sweet looking. But honestly, that's about it. There's some small things that I ordered too, but I'll kind of show you that as I go along. We have a new timing belt, we have some new hardware and stuff like that. Just kind of some general freshen up things. I figured do some things while the motor's out of the car, so we got new motor mounts, just stuff like that, like while you're there mods. But other than that, that is everything we have for this build. Like I said, we're not gonna start on the build in today's video, but I wanted to take you guys through and show you everything that's going into the build. And I think this is gonna be a pretty rad setup. I think it's gonna be a super fun setup for the street and way better than just returning it back to stock. Another one of the things that I did while this car has kind of been sitting, and I did it off camera, but I went through and I added Cartboy short shifter, as well as the white line bushings underneath for the cross member. So this is a way better shifting setup than the stock shifter. I also added the Group N transmission mount to pair with the Group N motor mounts that we're gonna be doing. I'm very particular with the way I have my cars set up. I just like there to be nothing left unturned. So I'm making sure that I'm going through and doing everything right to have a really balanced and fun setup for this car. It's not just about the power, it's about everything that goes into the car. But I'm super excited to see this thing running again. So, no, it was a shorter video this week, but we're gonna get started on the build the next episode. So I'm super excited, I hope you guys are too. With that, I need to get started on prepping this thing. I'm gonna be going from this video directly into filming the next video and assembling this long block, so stay tuned for that. We'll see you in the next one.